I went towards yoga when I was suffering from a very destructive eating disorder. I was anorexic at the time and had already been anorexic for a couple of years, and my weight way down to very dangerous levels, and destructive habits of not eating and over exercising and all the things that go along with that. But something happened over maybe the second or third week that I was in this class, is they had this sort of magic thing at the end called shavasana. And I was able to actually feel my body relax. Or actually, let me put it better, I was able to feel my body.
So I'm switching over to English now, Ateeka, and welcome so much.
Thank you.
Such a thrill to have you here, really.
Thank you.
And for those who, just to give you a little bit more presentation, because I've been following your work for quite a while now, actually, and I'm such in awe of your work. And just to go back here to present you, you have 25 years of practice in traditional and tantric yoga and somatic studies. You share yoga, that is like yogaSOMATICS is, and you explain it as an immediate, fluid, and experiential practice. You are the founder of yogaSOMATICS, healing and meditative movement approach infused with tantric wisdom, meditation, and modern somatic approaches. And your open-hearted style of teaching encourages the innate intelligence of the one's own body and felt sense to emerge its own unique and natural way. This is amazing. I felt that in me, and this is just amazing. And you travel internationally to share your innovative perspective of yogaSOMATICS and somatic bodywork.
I do.
Yeah. And when you're not traveling, you live close to nature with your chosen family.
Yep.
Amazing. So let's just dive into where did you start? What was your journey into yoga?
And actually, when you asked me the question and I was thinking about the question, I actually went all the way back to think, what year was it I had my first yoga class? And and I was surprised to see that it was actually 31 years ago when I took my first yoga class. And the interesting thing in reflecting on it, Katrine, was I entered into yoga in a reason that I don't think was a very life-affirming reason, actually. I went towards yoga when I was suffering from a very destructive eating disorder. I was anorexic at the time and had already been anorexic for a couple of years, and my weight way down to very dangerous levels, and destructive habits of not eating and over exercising and all the things that go along with that. And I saw that there was a picture in a magazine, or actually the back of a newspaper, of a woman in an extremely contorted sort of a shape, some foot behind the head here and a foot behind the head there. And I thought, somewhere it registered in my young mind, there's another way I could control my body. In a sense. It just sort of clicked that way. But then, so I decided it was at 5:30 in the morning. So that also sounded like a real good self-punishment to get up at 5:30 in the morning. That was what my psyche was saying at that time. You know? So I signed up for this class and I went. It was in a community center in California somewhere. And the same very slim lady with dreadlocks wasn't the teacher. It was a little bit more lady with the figure I have now, a little bit more rounded and middle-aged. And she was so kind, and we went in, and I immediately was able to do lots of these sort of fancy yoga poses, you know, because I was naturally flexible. Some people just have a little bit more joint flexibility than others, which isn't necessarily a better thing. It just was how my body was built. And so I started to go at these classes to see how much I could control and make my body do also other things besides not eating that way. But something happened over maybe the second or third week that I was in this class, is they had this sort of magic thing at the end called shavasana. And I was able to actually feel my body relax. Or actually, let me put it better, I was able to feel my body. When I, in a few of these moments of shavasana, maybe just for a little bit. And then I might run away again from that feeling, because there was a lot of emotional pain and conflict inside of me. But I kept going back for, is it before the t-shirt even? I'm only here for the shavasana. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, that was the mug and the t-shirt, but it was before that time. And I did keep going back for the shavasana. But I wouldn't tell anybody that. Because that to me, to let my system at that time, let my system relax, to let it have pleasure, to let it feel okay and not be struggling, that was shameful for me. However, I kept going back. And this quite nice teacher, she was just sort of nobody famous. I couldn't even remember her name now if you were to ask me. She was one of these simple community center teachers back in the 80s and early 90s, before everything got very commercial and glamorized and all that. And she just kept inviting me to take it a little more easy, to try to do the position or the posture with a little bit more softness. And I kept going. That fast forwards to me moving to Maui at some point in Hawaii. This was in California. And I found a wonderful 7 years in Ashtanga. So my decision from there was to move to an Ashtanga practice. Mostly, I think, because I was good at it. And often we'll go with what we're naturally good at. We don't, at that point in my life, I didn't really want to struggle at things. I had enough struggle inside. And I began to train with this wonderful woman Ashtanga teacher named Nancy Gilgoff, who is in the Ashtanga world knows that she's one of the great teachers of Ashtanga. And I was able to start to find some more contact to my body and to my breathing in Ashtanga. I was very dedicated for 7 years, and then began to experiment with other forms, Iyengar, Vinyasa, began to teach Shivananda style, Satyananda, and had a good career of teaching yoga in a Vinyasa style. Something happened though. Along the time when I was around just before 30 years old, and I was starting to heal this eating disorder between when I started and about 30 years old, it was on its way to being healed. And I started to feel very disillusioned with yoga in general. I really didn't like people having to tell me that I needed to do something just this way. And I know that there's many good teachers, but the form started to feel constricting to me. It started to hurt my joints. And maybe some ways I wasn't doing it wrong, but I think I was mostly pushing my limits a lot and moving into very repetitive motions. So, and somewhere I had expected inside of me that yoga would also make me feel better inside, that that kind of practice would resolve inner emotional issues. And I can see today that I would not be able to vinyasa my way out of an eating disorder. You know, it took more than that.
So what did you?
Tell me.
Yeah, sorry. Because then when you say that, then I wonder what was it then that you discovered that actually took you from there? Because obviously it took you to a place. It was an important part of the whole healing journey.
Yeah.
But then at what point you needed something else to take you further, it sounds
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
Yeah. What
It
was that?
seems, yeah, it seems like those first 12 years was actually me finding containment. I
Mm.
actually needed to find a way to start to feel that I had a body in a
Mm.
way,
Yeah.
and to create the containment so that at some point I could break free out of the containment. And there
Mm.
was a moment where I was feeling like I told you, so quite restricted in a
Mm.
formal practice. And I gave up and I decided I was no longer going to be a yoga teacher or
Mm.
do yoga. And I had a fantasy of going to work in the mall at a store.
Mm.
So,
Mm.
so I did that. I went to work in a mall in the store for a little while because I
Mm.
thought that sounded easier. And
Mm.
in some sense, it was easier. But in that time, I actually met a woman called Emily Conrad.
Mm.
And this woman already at this time was in her 70s. And
Mm.
she's the founder of a non-yoga form, but a somatic movement form called continuum movement.
Mm.
And I was very lucky to start to be able to mentor with Emily. She's died a couple of years ago now.
Mm.
But I was able to mentor with her quite intensively for 8 years. And her work was all about tuning into the fluid movements of the body.
Mm.
We use sound, we use non-repetitive, unpatterned movements
Mm.
to move very slowly and start to help the nervous system have a new plasticity and
Mm.
new information.
Mm.
I did that for 8 years with her and abandoned yoga completely.
Mm.
In the 7th year, my yoga practice started to emerge back out of these unpatterned and movements that were just like waves and spirals, but the forms began to come back in a new way in my body, and a
Mm.
way that it felt like it actually felt like the yoga forms were the first time that I ever practiced them. First time I could ever do a dog and
Mm.
actually feel how that sensation of dog or a backward bend or a forward bend, when
Mm.
it come from inside,
Yeah.
felt.
Yeah.
And when I could start to feel things from the inside, then I had meaning for my practice,
Mm.
for me.
Mm.
It was mine. It wasn't somebody else telling me what to do.
Mm.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
from there began to grow, really grow the healing part of the practice
Right.
for me.
Yeah, that is so, so beautiful. That is so beautiful. I notice myself that when sometimes it's really great to just have somebody telling you what to do and you just go and do it.
Yeah. It's also nice. Yeah.
And how you know it's different, but there's also a experience of really
Hmm.
owning yourself, that you really just, it comes and it grows from the inside to out, and it takes the form it kind of needs to take, and the form isn't really important anymore. It's kind of the process
Hmm.
toward it. Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
so that's what I
Yeah.
feel has been very, very transformative in me in the
Hmm.
meeting with yogaSOMATICS and the work that you do.
Hmm.
When you invited me to feel that kind of shift.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that said, Katrine, I
Mm.
agree that when we have really good and caring and qualified teachers that also teach alignment-based forms,
Mm.
it's lovely. I have
Definitely. Yeah.
no conflict with
Mm.
alignment-based forms. I
Mm.
just know for me at that point in my life, it wasn't enough
Mm.
for me, and my
Mm.
inner process needed, and my inner woman needed to find something that
Mm.
was a form that emerged from within rather than from the outside.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's interesting. Can you say more about that?
Mhm.
Your inner woman
Yeah,
needed.
yeah.
Yeah.
When I was unwell with the eating disorder,
Mm.
um, I lost my period for 3 years,
Mm.
and I lost contact with my sexuality and my sensuality,
Mm.
and really had this driving inner and overriding masculine energy
Mm.
happening in my system, which in a way I think kept me alive,
Mm.
because this push, this will, I mean, otherwise I may not have made it.
Mm.
Um, But over that process of moving into a different movement, and a movement that was fluid based. So fluid moves in spirals and spheres and pulses, and it always follows and is faithful to the frequency it's exposed to. By moving in a fluid way and the way water moves, I was able to tune into something much more yin and much more feminine in myself. Also, men can move this way. So it's not really about men and women, but in a way that I could feel. And I started to also get a much more healthy menstruation cycle, a much more healthy curves on my body, started to get in contact with, I love the Norwegian word, my lust, in a way. Yeah, and in all senses, I was able to start to feel my life energy coming back. It was a long process, 12, 15 years. And I think it's important for women, at least for me as a woman, and the women that I work with seem to say so too, that to be able to connect with one's own felt sense of their body and their breathing, but especially first case the body, that how a body feels rather than how it should look is so important. And we're so faced, maybe I'm jumping a little bit here, but we're so faced with comparison-based models in social media and all around us. That and I even catch myself still today in when you see some very beautiful model or very beautiful person that's been photoshopped or whatever. We leave Beyonce, she's just beautiful, so she's always beautiful. So we're not talking about Beyonce, but yeah. And I can still connect to see that there's immediately a comparison that can happen in the system. But if I'm in my inner practice, in my movement, whether it's yoga, whether it's dancing, whether it's spontaneous movement, I feel what I feel like rather than what I look like. And that touches me more into what I feel like as a woman. And there I can start to build some confidence. And I think other women can start to build a confidence in how they feel. Yeah. And then the life energy starts to circulate.
Yeah. Well, that's beautiful. So I guess the next question is about how then can yoga be the healing practice for women? Because that's kind of the topic, this yoga health summit this year. I wanted it to come closer to the not only yoga and health, but also for the feminine life, the women and a womanhood, the life of a woman in this year of 2020. So
yeah, it's an interesting, I think it's probably always been interesting to be a woman, and it must be interesting to be a man too. So it's kind of a stupid thing to say, but finally it's interesting to be a woman. But the world is very, very polarized right now. In some ways coming very close, but in other ways quite polarized. And I would imagine it's hard for many women to actually find a balance in the way the world is. I hear that from many women that I work with. I would say that very important is for a woman to be able to begin to embody her body. It doesn't necessarily mean right away that she likes it. Maybe she will. I think that's a long journey to actually have real self-acceptance for one's body. But to be able to come in contact with feeling the body, and we feel our bodies as life energy. We think we feel it as a body, but when we really can go back and say, how do I know I'm feeling my body in a movement, for example. We can touch into if we feel the texture of our skin, or if we can feel it more in the upper part of the body or the lower, or the temperature, or the space around us, if we feel ourselves moving in the space around us. And as we start to get in contact with how we can feel what we call bioenergy or our life energy moving, then there comes a little bit more confidence that we can know we're alive in a way. When we can know that we're alive, then we get to actually think or consider how do I want to use this life energy? How do I want to be with what is so, I don't want to sound so spacious, but it really is sacred. But it's so sacred when we can get in touch with our life energy. Sometimes when I'm feeling a little blue or gray and kind of down, I will think to when I remember to, I say to myself, I want my life back. And it means I want to get in contact with my own life energy. Where have I let it go dormant? Where have I let it go away? Where do I stay in my head and think? And it doesn't take too long for women and men to start to actually recognize the signals of their own bioenergy in the system.
What is the signals? What are they?
Oh, the easy
what
ones.
Do you look for?
The easy ones, they begin with you could recognize that you're breathing. I know it sounds really basic, but to recognize that one is breathing is a symbol that you're alive. Yeah. Or it's really interesting too. I sometimes watch Netflix, whether that's healthy or not, I don't know, but I sometimes like to watch Netflix.
Me too.
Yeah. And one of the things I sometimes like to watch is science fiction, because science fiction has a lot of interesting little edges that are pointing towards things that are happening, or maybe in 20 years happening, into artificial intelligence and different things like that. When who knows what form it will take. But for example, these shows about AI, they look like humans, they talk like humans, they move like humans, but they're not human. And I remember just not too long ago, one person, they just put their hand through the AI, or there was no temperature. So a quality of being alive as a human is density, body density, volume, the temperature of the skin. Human beings are warm. Yeah. So to actually tap in with one's own body temperature is quite the feeling of digestion, and also can be the feeling of pain. Pain doesn't feel good, but it does show us that there's bioenergy that gets contracted or held up in different places. And we can start to use movements to circulate some of that. It's not so easy always. We can start to use certain movements, sounds, breaths, relaxation, inner exercises, visualization to activate the bioenergy and create circulation. Yeah. Long answer.
Yeah, well, it's beautiful. And I know, I've experienced it, and I've been in your classes, and it's amazing. And it's kind of hard to talk about, actually, and it's hard to explain it with words, because it is, as you say, experiential. You just really have to try it in a way. So
it's the way I practice, and many women do. Yeah, around me.
Yeah. So I just want to take you back. You were talking about I was asking you how can yoga be a healing practice for women, and then you said something about embodiment, and these are the signs of kind of knowing that, okay, I am in this body.
Yeah, these are some of the signs.
Yeah, I am breathing, and I move my body. I feel the density of my body. I can touch the floor in a way. I feel my feet on the ground, some of those things, or I feel something moving inside, or digestion, as you mentioned.
Sure. Yeah.
So other things that has, in this conversation of how yoga could be a healing practice for women, other things to mention.
In men and women's bodies, we have a center called the Hara Center. And the Hara Center For who is familiar with some yoga terms, could be relating around the second chakra, but not only. Might also include the root some. But this area, if one was to touch their belly lower than the navel and above the pubic bone, and also the whole area front and back. And the Hara center is a really important center for women to get in contact with. We do a lot of work with getting in touch with the energy in this center. So it might be that we start to feel that it's full, or there's some, most women will feel their Hara center around the time of their ovulation or their menstruation, because there's some activity there, there's some movement happening. Things change when a woman stops bleeding, and there's different signals. And for a woman, it's men too, but since we're talking about women, for a woman to start to descend her attention and give attention to Hara center, which is center of sensuality, sexuality, creativity, change, and flow, and containment as well. For me, it's a really important place for a woman to keep finding a way to come home to. It's also an area that has a lot of trauma for many women, an area that can be culturally cut off. It's also an area of instinct. And sometimes when we think of something as instinctual, that means it's like an animal and it's out in the jungle. And of course there is that instinctual aspect, but also it's instinctual for a bird to feather its nest or to find food for its young, or to do also more soft and yin type instinctual activities. So when we can start to, we have different inner exercises, movements, breathing, spiraling and stirring of this Hara center. And when we can start to get in touch with Hara center, we can be getting closer to our contact to our own instinct. I think culture has pulled us a little bit away from our instinctual nature. And when women start to touch back in with it, they know a lot of things.
Yeah.
Don't you agree?
I totally agree. Totally. This is where I would say like the feminine wisdom, or the sacred feminine wisdom lays and just waits for you. And as you say, I also agree that society might value other qualities higher, so that it takes actually a lot to first, like there's one thing to actually get in touch with that, but then when you are in touch with them, like trusting it and kind of own it or stand up for it, or in a way just live with yourself, with that instinct or with that wisdom, or whatever you can call it.
It's practice. It's my experience is that it's a constant practice, and it's not that all of a sudden we get it and then it's there for life. It takes dedication to reconnect every day to that center. And the interesting thing about that center is it's can be related to water element. And a lot of people, it's funny because a lot of people say that they're resistant to change, but at the same time, if everything stayed the same all the time, we would really be not very happy about it either.
Oh, I would be crazy.
Me too. Me too. And of course, we don't want erratic change. We don't want things jumping around all over the place. But we can find where flow and change is the nature, and very much for women, flow and change. We see it happen in the cycles and the way that we move in the world can have these different rhythms. You maybe have another guest that talks about menstruation or something like that, and we know that the world doesn't quite match up. The world rhythm or the work rhythm doesn't usually quite match up to that. But to give attention to Hara and to find one's own instincts, that I think is a very good way, a direction towards healing. Because then we start to at least be able to sense what might be right for me today, what might not be right for me today. but I don't think we can think our way there.
Mm.
Um, I believe, and I know that
Mm.
we need to move our way there and
Mm.
feel and sense our way there. Hara
Mm.
doesn't think. The mind thinks,
Mm.
Hara feels,
Mm. Right.
you know?
Yeah.
So I've gotten much more out of moving my body and finding ways to get in contact with the felt sense and
Mm.
then let the energy move from there. It sounds a little bit vague because you're
Mm.
saying, well, what movements do you do? But of
Yeah.
course, that would be hard to describe over an interview.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. And we could, I could try to ask you how is yoga somatic different than other kind of yoga styles?
Yeah.
I guess the best way is to say, by my experience, it's just so much more slower.
Yeah, it's generally much more slow. Yeah.
And very, very inwardly,
Mm.
very, very intuitive and
Yeah.
experiential. Yeah.
Mm.
Do you
Yeah.
have, do you want to add? I guess there is so much to say about that, but
Yeah, but there's kind of
yeah.
an interesting way to look at it because people
Mm.
say, well, if I'm free to move however I want, then how is it yoga? Why if I'm just going to roll around? But that's really not so much what we're doing.
Mm.
You could describe it as, I know you know this metaphor too, because you've done it with me, but is the islands and the oceans.
Mm.
So we see the asana or the yoga forms or positions to be islands. So imagine you have the gesture or the asana of the cat on all
Mm.
fours,
Mm.
and you have the gesture of the dog, perhaps, or I call them gestures, the
Mm.
asana of the dog,
Yeah.
just to put them in simple terms. And between dog on all fours, or cat on all fours, and dog, sometimes we just move from there to there, A to B.
Mm.
But in yogaSOMATICS, we're very curious about what can happen if we go slower and what we feel.
Mm.
Not to need to create something to make something up, but what we feel if we move slower from one position to another.
Mm.
And we have also some leaning into 6 developmental movements that yielding or leaving our weight into earth and then pushing into earth and reaching, that are some of the
Mm.
same movements how we develop our movement as young babies.
Mm.
That's where we set up our patterns for life in a way.
Mm.
So with yogaSOMATICS, if we go slower, and also if the teacher give a
Mm.
few other options or something new,
Mm.
then we actually can start to open up new neural pathways in our bodies, which
Mm.
and our brains,
Mm.
of course,
Mm.
which changes everything, changes the way we feel, the way we move, and then also belief systems can change from there. It's
Mm.
a slow process.
Mm.
It's not an overnight yoga,
Mm.
but most people say that after after a short amount of time practicing it, they feel it feels pleasurable.
Mm. Mm.
So, and that's one of the how do you call them? The barometers of our practice. Is it pleasurable?
Mm. Mm. Oh, it's amazing. I
Mhm.
Yeah, I see our connection is a little bit slow, so I hope we're
Okay.
still on. There we are.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Okay. Good.
so our time is starting to come to an end here, but
Sure.
just for the kind of the end, if you're going to wrap it all up and
Yeah.
give like one advice or one word of wisdom based on your experience, what would that be?
Learn ways that you can be in contact with a felt sense in the body. To
Mm.
actually, for women to learn ways that they could actually feel their bodies. Not just say, feel
Mm.
your body, but learn trusted ways that one could do that.
Mm.
So that we start to be able to have the capacity to stay home in
Mm.
ourselves. And I
Mm.
have a metaphor I like to say is to stay home, but with the windows open.
Mm.
So we can actually experience the world, exchange with others, have new ideas come in, not be closed in, but
Mm.
sitting in ourselves.
Mm.
And it takes learning skills and learning to do that.
Mm.
And in yoga, different forms of yoga, yogaSOMATICS are
Mm.
so good for that. And the other wisdom is to find a teacher that you can over time cultivate trust in. Because our patterns are so strong in our systems. And some of them are good and we want to keep them. I don't want to learn how to drive again. That pattern I want to keep. But other movement patterns that may bring pain into my body or frustration or that, one might not have enough resources to change those patterns all alone. So to find a teacher that they can build a growing trust with, whatever style it is that they're attracted to, is important, because that good teacher can help to widen the field a little bit. I think those would be two things. Yeah. And to be kind to themselves.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one too, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Well, thank you so much. I'm very grateful for your
You are welcome.
Yeah, your time.
You see, I could talk for a long time about it, huh?
We could go on, right? For a couple of hours more, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for the time, Katrine. I'm happy to share with it. I'm passionate about it. And have a lot of love for this practice and helping other people, and especially women. So thanks for what you're doing to open up the conversation for women.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.